Good morning, I'm Diane Smith. Welcome to Capitol Report Morning Update for Monday, May 23rd. Glad you could join us today. Well, here's what's going on. 2 weeks from Wednesday, the 2011 session will close at midnight. So final legislative action on bills is expected to pick up steam in the House and the Senate starting this week, when both chambers may hold sessions every day but today. Meanwhile, the Appropriations Committee is meeting today to consider referred bills from the House and Senate which have fiscal impact on the state. Those bills include HB 6489 concerning the DNA testing of people arrested for serious felonies. This bill out of the Judiciary Committee is one of several DNA bills introduced this session. Also referred SB 1059, implementing the recommendations of the Commission on Enhancing Agency Outcomes, which studied ways to streamline state government and save money. This bill has already passed 4 other committees so far. And Appropriations will consider HB 6581, which makes numerous changes to motor vehicle laws, including an increase in the penalties for anybody charged more than once for using a handheld cell phone while driving or texting while driving. The biggest priority of the session, passing a new 2-year budget, has already happened, and Governor Malloy has signed it into law. But the union concessions part of it is still working its way through the approval process. The governor and the state employee unions have reached a deal to get $1.6 of the $2 billion written into the budget. The rank and file of the individual unions must now vote to ratify the agreement. As for the remaining $400 million not reached in concessions, Governor Malloy must present a plan to the legislature to close that gap by a week from tomorrow, May 31st. On Friday, administration officials briefed the media on the timetable for possible closure of this budget process.
We anticipate ratification by the unions in June, but not necessarily in advance of June 8th, which is the close of the legislative session. I'd love it if it happened, and I'm not going to rule that out. But we are cognizant of the fact that there are some unions who have expressed that they may not be able to accomplish ratification before then. But we do anticipate that ratification can occur in June, so that it will happen before the beginning of the upcoming fiscal year. As you know, the budget bill that was enacted requires us to submit I think of it as sort of a budget reconciliation package to the General Assembly by a week from next Tuesday, May 31st, and that the General Assembly would act on that prior to June 8th. Clearly, that puts them in a position to act on that package in advance of ratification of the agreements by the bargaining units, potentially by a week or two. We are in discussions with leadership in the General Assembly about how best to proceed through that set of facts, and there are several alternatives that we are discussing. Ultimately, we will submit our budget reconciliation package on May 31st that will assume the adoption of the ratification of the agreement by CBAC, because I don't really. That's the only way we can comply with the law as it's currently written, and the General Assembly will make a determination as to how it chooses to act on that. We're obviously in discussions with them, but that's their prerogative. We're aware of the timing issues, and there are several alternatives that they are considering that would allow methods that would allow them to move through all these pieces of business that are coming together in an order that's hard to determine.
I think this governor has made clear by now that he always has a backup plan in place, but we are proceeding as if this agreement will be ratified. That is the hope that I think both sides share. If it's not, there will be a contingency in place. But that's the road we're going down.
Now, Republican leaders responded by posting a video on YouTube with their critiques of the plan, and they said they're concerned that the unions will not have ratified the deal by the end of the legislative session, meaning lawmakers could adjourn without having a final budget in place, which is what you heard Ben Barnes saying there. So joining us now to talk about that and other issues, our regular Monday morning guest, Keith Phaneuf of the Connecticut Mirror. Of course, you can read him every single day on ctmirror.org. Keith, what was the point of that briefing on Friday? Is the Malloy Administration worried that this deal is not going to pass, or are they concerned about taxpayer reaction to the deal?
I think it was probably a little bit more of the latter, because honestly, there wasn't a lot of new material that came out. I think it was sort of a preemptive move. You don't want to see weekend editorials or articles saying tons of unanswered questions. Malloy Administration didn't give the media a chance. And they had, in fairness to them, maybe there wasn't something that strategic. They just had gotten a lot of questions. That being said, though, there's still one area that this could come back to bite them, and that is they've defended several of their savings assumptions by saying we've had healthcare actuaries or pension actuaries, fiscal analysts who specialize in different types of cost containment areas. Look at these. The Mirror, I'm sure, is not the only organization that has an FOI request in to see these actuarial, whether they're full-blown reports, maybe something a little less formal. Those still haven't been released. And that, to me, is the one missing piece of the puzzle. Did you get some detailed analysis telling you, yes, this move will save a lot of money? Or, was an analyst on the phone going, yeah, that sounds kind of good. Ballpark, I don't know, $100 million a year, put that down. And it's the equivalent of 2 lines in an email.
Yeah.
That's what people are still wondering.
Yeah. You talked a little bit with me before the program about something that we just heard Roy Occhio-Grosso say there, which is the governor always has an alternative prepared. Now, he actually would have 2 alternatives, I guess. One is, how do you close that $400 million gap? The other one is, if the whole thing were to fall apart, then what? So let's talk about that a little bit.
He's got a Swiss Army knife, I think, of alternatives at this point. Just to remind everybody, he was counting on originally getting about $1 billion a year, $2 billion over the biennium. He got 1.6, about 700 the first year, 900 the second. So no matter what, as you just pointed out, he has to come up with $400 million in alternatives. If for any reason the plan is modified slightly, and I'll give you an example of how that could happen. Let's say all of the unions ratify the healthcare savings, but as you know, the bargaining units, within the unions vote separately on the wage agreement. So if you have 2 or 3 unions that don't accept wage concessions, it's not even as simple as saying, well, we could cover that by laying off members of those unions. If it's the correction department, if it's the Department of Transportation, there's a lot of speculation. They're already so threadbare that you might not be able to see layoffs. In 2009, we had layoffs we had the correction department unions refusing to grant wage concessions, and there were still no layoffs. So he might need more than $400 million. And as was pointed out in some of the video we saw, he might not even have all those answers before June 8th.
Well, then, can they close out the session without a budget? Larry Cafaro, in his comments on Friday, made it sound as though he's extremely reluctant to do that, but that has happened not that infrequently.
Sure. Now, no matter what, they'll close out the session with a budget. It may be a budget with question marks, and we've had budgets. I mean, technically, you have a budget with question marks every year. You set, they call them lapses, but they're unidentified savings targets. And that sounds sort of sloppier than it is. I mean, in an entity as big as state government, in any given year, a certain number of people are going to quit just from normal turnover. And you might have a 2, 3, 4 week lapse before you fill their vacancy. Well, you save some money. So you budget to employ people the full year, and you set a lapse target to scoop up the extra savings. A couple of years ago, when Governor Rell and the legislature adopted the last biennial budget of her term, we set some huge lapse targets that were big question marks. So they'll adopt something no matter what. If for some reason the union concessions are wrapped up afterward and it leaves us with savings targets we think we can't hit, now maybe then they have to come back in. But I think no matter what, you'll see the budget adopted. To me, the bigger question is, when the smoke clears on the union concessions, is there a small but significant hole because a few unions wouldn't give concessions? Is there a gaping hole because the whole deal collapsed and the health care concessions and pension concessions failed?
Mm-hmm. One of the things that Governor Malloy would like is the authority to make changes in the budget unilaterally, and this would be, sounds like, targeting municipal and town aid. A lot of people are not going to like that.
Yeah. Ever since the income tax, the governor has had the authority, and it's very broad. It doesn't have to, we don't have to be in deficit. It's whenever the governor, the statute says, feels the revenues might not be sufficient to what? To meet his or her satisfaction. In other words, very broad powers to cut any line item by up to 5% without going back to the legislature. Governor Rowland used that power a lot. Governor Rell, very little. One area, though, that's always been immune from that is municipal aid. That's one thing the governor cannot touch. Governor Malloy asked at the start of the year for two changes. He wanted his unilateral authority bumped up to 10% and to include town aid. Now, when you think in a $20 billion budget, town aid is about $3 billion. So you're talking more than 15% of the budget. That's, in theory, $300 million he could cut with, one signature. It would be highly unlikely he'd cut that much. But what if what we just talked about happens? The union deal really blows up. The legislature has, I think, already made it clear to him they're opposed to giving the governor that power permanently. He's already taken a step back and said, well, how about giving it to me for 1 year? That's still in play, and that's going to be probably resolved over the next week or so.
Let's talk about a couple of the other issues that are still in play, because this budget issue has been so dominating this session. But still, some bills that have been pretty controversial, and I don't know whether some of these even still have a chance. But one of the things we've seen go through several committees, medical marijuana and also decriminalization of small amounts, possession of small amounts of marijuana. Are those alive?
I think very much alive, provided they're done promptly. The thing they have going for them is they have a governor who supports them, as opposed to previous governor, Governor Rell, who opposed them. On the other hand, the minority still doesn't like them, and the closer you get to the deadline, the stronger their ability is to filibuster. And it doesn't have to be the last night. If they wait until the final 3 days or so, and we're not there yet, but if they wait till that, you can spare maybe about an hour or 2 hour debate per bill. And so I don't have to, if I start filibustering Monday morning, tie you up until Wednesday at midnight. I can just threaten to go 5 or 6 hours. And if the majority can't spare that, because they have to get so many other bills through the system, they have to let it go. So I think they have a good chance, provided they don't dawdle. Is that a political term? They cannot dawdle is the official term. That
may be a term that the nuns at my Catholic elementary school used to use. Stop dawdling there, Ms. Smith.
They're not dawdle-proof.
The paid sick leave. The governor actually went into the Senate to lobby for this. What would have to happen for that to be approved?
That's not just a dawdling issue, and I'll move past that. It's a situation where, to me, it's all about perception. Particularly, some legislators are worried that even if the bill is, the final version is extremely limited, that very narrow conditions would have to exist before a company would have to provide paid sick leave to everybody, that if it sends the message that, as the saying's gone, Connecticut's not open for business, that they could then get blamed in an election year as the legislator who's responsible for slowing down the recovery. This is a hot button where people aren't even looking at the bill. It's just, how am I going to be perceived when the smoke clears? And I think that I could see this going, honestly, either way.
Interesting. There has been a lot of discussion that one of its major proponents, Edith Prague, has been cutting a deal or working on cutting a deal that might narrow it enough that it would get through. And of course, what the Republicans have said is that no matter if it does get through, it's just going to open the door to making it broader and broader over the next few years.
And if people believe that accusation will stick, that there's no amount of watering it down that's going to, give you some political Teflon, then it could sink the whole bill.
Yeah. One of the things that we heard about just a couple of weeks ago was a major expansion of the Yukon Medical Center. Now, I don't have to remind you that a couple of years ago when the then Governor Rell proposed refurbishing and updating the medical center, there was a huge outcry from other area hospitals